to Women Lit Unbound. I'm Sherilyn Parsons, founder and executive director of Women Lit. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome the brilliant mind behind The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron, for her latest book, The Listening Path. I'd also like to thank our partners and sponsors for this program, the University of San Francisco's MFA in Writing program, the Ruby, Portland Literary Arts, the Helene Wurlitzer Foundation in New Mexico, and Green Apple Books. Women Lit produces thought-provoking events with captivating female authors like tonight, in addition to building community among artistically inclined women and men. You can learn more on our website, womenlit.org, including information on upcoming events and how to become a member. So now, an introduction for our speakers. Julia Cameron is the best-selling author of more than 40 books, including the latest, which we're celebrating today, The Listening Path, The Creative Art of Attention, a 6-week Artist's Way program. Julia is commonly referred to as the Godmother of Creativity. With the Artist's Way publication in 1992, Julia launched a movement that inspired millions and brought creativity into mainstream conversation. She is joined by Judy Collins, a Grammy Award-winning singer and songwriter, activist, and filmmaker, who has authored several books herself, including Sanity and Grace and Sweet Judy Blue Eyes. You can watch Judy recreate her solo debut concert on February 12th through New York City's Town Hall, and you can find out more at thetownhall.org. So please join me in welcoming Julia and Judy.
Thank you so much, Sherilyn. And it's wonderful to be here. This is such a privilege. I want to say that I'm Judy Collins, and I will be moderating this conversation with the remarkable Julia Cameron. She's a friend, she's a genius, she's an amazing woman. But throughout the program, you'll also be thinking about and talking about Julia's new book. Julia, it's a stunning thing to see all the books you've written, The Artist's Way, of course. Now, The Artist's Way has meant so much to me as a writer, as a singer, as a performer, and as a fan of yours, because you put things in context that I don't see otherwise. I don't always have an access to all of my senses, and I don't think any of us have access all the time. But what your writing has done since I've met you and started reading your books and have seen what this does for other people and myself is to begin to be aware of things that were very mysterious to me. And I want to ask you, first of all, I want to read you something from your own book, which is a quote. One of the things that Julia does so brilliantly is that within her chapters, she pauses to get the reference back and forth between herself and other writers, other people who understand language. And one of the things that I saw when I started your book, new book to me, was a quote that's on page 56, and it says, it's from Vera Nazarian, and it says, listen to the trees as they sway in the wind. Their leaves are telling secrets. Their bark sings songs of olden days as it grows around the trunks. And their roots give names to all things. Their language has been lost, but not the gestures. Tell me something. In this new book of yours, I want to find out from you what brought you to this. I know you're a woman who listens to others speak and talk and write. And I know that your life is one about being in touch with your creativity. But what brought you to this particular book, which is going to help all of us? How did it reach you, and what prompted you to write it?
So I moved.
Oh, right.
I lived in Manhattan, down the street from you.
Yes, yes.
It was a noisy, hectic, busy city. And I moved from Manhattan and all of the hubbub to Santa Fe, which was suddenly quiet and calm. And I found it terrifying. I was missing urban noises. I thought, where are my sirens?
Yeah.
How do I know where I am? And then as I relaxed, I began to realize that I was listening more keenly to sound, that I could hear the wind in the trees, that I could hear the songbirds, that I would hear the raucous cawing of a raven, that I would hear a truck on a dirt road. And I thought, there's something to this listening.
Mm.
I'm feeling a little bit smarter. So I thought, well, maybe I should be writing about listening. Maybe I should be talking more about layers of listening. And I went to lunch with Joel Fotinos, who has been your editor as well as mine. And Joel said to me, Julia, what are you thinking about? And I said, I'm thinking about listening. And he said, oh, I would love to hear more about that. So the combination of my awakening hearing and Joel's curiosity became the catalyst for the book. So that's how it came to be.
And the talk with Joel, of course, and you listened to what Joel said.
Yes.
And he listened to you. These conversations that we have, how rich they are, how full of meaning, and how rich and full of overtones they are. Often what is felt between people is not always expressed in language. It can be expressed in all kinds of ways. I know that you know this about me, but I grew up, of course, in a family where my father was not only a wonderful singer and a performer, but he was blind. And I have spent a lifetime preoccupied with what that meant to me as a growing up child, and what it meant to me to listen to him sing and also to listen to him think, because his thinking was so involved in what he couldn't see but what he heard. He would say to me once in a while, I'm so glad that I'm blind and not deaf, because had I been deaf, I would never have a life that I have. So the music always taught me. The music was there, but it was the impression of the hearing of all of the things that you've made me much more aware of in reading this book. It's suddenly startling. I think about my meditations and what invites me into meditation. I like to listen to the Wave app on my computer, on my telephone when I meditate. And the waves take me to places that I couldn't go otherwise. And I wanted to ask you, how, in terms of your marvelous discovery of the morning pages, which I want to ask you about the morning and the night pages, there are things about the morning pages that are obvious to one who has read your book or who has consistently written down their dreams or journaled as a life form in a way. What's the difference between the morning pages and the night pages to you?
Well, they're very different. I want to say morning pages are 3 pages of longhand morning writing that are a form of meditation, and they are about anything and everything. You write down what we call in meditation our cloud thoughts as they come cruising through our consciousness. And we write, I think we get to know ourselves with pages.
Mm-hmm.
We become more authentic. Jungians tell us we have 45 minutes in the morning before our defenses are in place.
Oh.
So I'm hoping that people will write their morning pages when they're vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
What morning pages do is acquaint us with how we really think and how we really feel. And they lay out a path for the day. And what happens when you do evening pages is that you're writing about a day you've already had and you're powerless to change.
Mm.
So they're very different. Evening pages are a form of reflection and a form of guidance, where you write, here is how I feel about that. Mm. And you take it down. Mm. But I think for my purposes, I want to say to people, please do your pages in the morning. Please don't wait to do them at night. They don't have the same effectiveness.
Mm. And there is that mystical, thank you, God, for this revelation all the time, because when I wake up, I was always a dreamer. I'm a dreamer anyway, but I had always a fantastic dream recall. And when I was little, my dreams were in black and white. I guess that could have been possibly connected with my father's lack of sight. I don't know. I'm not an analyst, so I can't tell you that. But they were black and white until the day after a big surgery for one of my many ski accidents. I was off of various drugs, and they suddenly put me on a big drug, and suddenly my dreams were in color, vivid color. And in the past many, many years, as I've been able to connect with the meditation and the disciplines that go into keeping on the planet and being happy, joyous, and free, I know that those moments, and if Jung says 45 minutes, I believe him. And if you quote him as 45 minutes, I believe you. That's a lot of time, actually, when you're in that wonderfully open and, as you say, vulnerable state where it's a new day and the horizons have broadened, certainly enough for you to see the coffee pot from here. And there's a vast area of wonderment, so that when I get down to writing my pages, as you said, I never know what's going to come out.
Right.
The surprises, the previously non-evident proof of things that will come to pass or have come to pass. I want to talk to you about in your listening discussions. I was brought to a workshop at the New School in about 1979. And it was led by a wonderful teacher of writing whose name you know and that I've forgotten at this moment. But one of the things that we were asked to do was to dialogue with and listen to the voices of people who were not present on the property anymore. And I had a long conversation with my great-grandfather. Is it possible to listen to without actual sound coming through, but with the idea of what they're saying or hearing them in your mind? Does that count?
Yes, absolutely. I want to say that one of the chapters in the listening path is called Listening Through the Veil, which is what you were doing when you were contacting your grandfather. And you and I had a friend, Jane Cecil, a wonderful actress. And when Jane was alive, I checked in with her just about every day. And when she died, I was bereft. And I thought, I've lost my Jane. And then I thought, wait a minute, maybe I haven't lost my Jane. And I wrote, can I hear from Jane? And then I listened. And I heard words without words, words that formed images. And she said, I'm right by your side. You can always choose faith over fear.
Yes.
And I So when I wrote the book, I thought, oh dear, people are going to think I'm too woo-woo.
But, wooey wooey, we need a lot of wooey wooey in our lives.
Well, I have a girlfriend, a Jungian analyst, who says to me, Julia, woo-woo is where it's at. When I taught the listening path in London recently, I got to this chapter and I was a little bit edgy about trying to teach it, a little bit fearful of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, they opened up, they blossomed, they were excited, they were eager to talk beyond the veil. And it was as if they had just been waiting for someone to come along and give them permission.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like when you went to your workshop, the teacher gave you permission.
Yes, he did. And I came home and I'd been fighting for about 4 years because I was still drinking. I hadn't written anything or had an inspirational thought for a number of years. And I think I've told you this, that I felt after this happened and I had this conversation with the great grandfather, I felt this almost like a sword going through my heart. And I said to Nancy, who had taken me to this event, I said, it was rainy. It was a Saturday afternoon. By the way, I could hear the rain falling, pouring on the streets of New York. And I said, I have to leave. I'm in pain. And I got home and I got to bed and I thought it broke through. The sound of his voice broke through something in me and opened up the writing path for me in my life. I was thinking about when my son died. I was bereft and horrified and terrified and out of my mind. And I went to the funeral, which was in St. Paul. And the first thing that I did was to go after we'd been to the police to see whether they thought it was an accident or not, or on purpose or whatever. And the therapist that I saw, who was wonderful, she said to me, the relationship with between you and your son will never be over. It was tremendously comforting, of course. And I would hear him, and I still do, I hear him talk, but he said things to me directly and completely loudly in my ears. So I was open to hearing. I suppose shock and loss and also great joy are sometimes the hearing piece that we need. If we're shaken up by something, maybe we hear more in more vital ways. And so I wanted to ask you about who was your first mentor? Who was it who kind of grabbed a hold of Julia Cameron and said, you've got this gift, or you're going to have it, or how did you find it? Who inspired you?
I went to Catholic schools, and there was a little teeny nun who liked expensive shoes. Her nun's outfit, and then she would wear very hip shoes. Her name was Sister Julia Clare. And Sister Julia Clare came and took me on a journey as a poet. And I wanted to read a poem that has to do with listening. If you could give me a second.
I certainly will. I'm thinking about your nun and her habit and her pretty shoes.
This is called Come to Me. Come to me. There is no darkness in which I cannot see you. Come to me. My green heart holds your ancestors. They are waiting to hear your dreams. Speak to them. They know your name. Do not imagine you are alone. Do not imagine they have left you. They are listening, waiting for your voice. Come home. All of us are waiting. Every bird remembers you. The lion, in his pride, still knows your name. The gazelle, the snake, the silver heron lifting at the shore, all these and more, your family. Come back to me. You do not need to grind your bones to dust, rusting your heart. You are known to us. Only come home.
Mm.
So Sister Judy Clare started me on a path as a poet, and it's my secret life. I've never published my poetry. It's on my website, and it's how I speak my secret heart.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that beautiful, beautiful piece. It's just very moving, very moving. Poetry really is the secret heart, isn't it? It is the place where we get those few moments in the morning. That's when I write my poems, and I try to write them after I write my morning pages, which is sometimes a challenge. Sometimes they are my morning pages, I'll tell you. In your relationship with so many writers and so many poems, or so many poets, do you have favorite writers that have moved you along, that have pushed you along, that have challenged you into doing things differently or with less fear?
I would say I'm a fan of Mary Oliver. She's a
Wonderful
poet.
Wonderful.
And I'm a personal fan of Rumi and Kabir,
Yes.
who are spiritual poets.
Yes.
And they open the door to my heart. And they have given me permission to try and write about spiritual things.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I stretch when I listen to them. And I'm looking here to see if I can find one other poem, which is about spirituality. And I feel that the listening path is a spiritual path, as the artist's way was a spiritual path. But, we often talk about poetry coming out of pain. We have an image of a tortured artist barely getting to the page. But my experience is that poetry comes from joy.
Mm.
So I want to read you, Jerusalem is walking in this world.
Oh, good.
This is a great happiness. The air is silk. There is milk in the looks that come from strangers. I could not be happier if I were bread and you could eat me. Joy is dangerous. It fills me with secrets. Yes, kisses in my veins. The pains I take to hide myself are sheer as glass. Surely this will pass. The wind like kisses, the music in the soup, the group of trees laughing as I say their names. It is all Hosanna, all prayer. Jerusalem is walking in this world. Jerusalem is walking in this world. So I want to thank you to Sister Mary Judy Clare for launching me down that road.
When I was in high school, and I was trained as a musician, so my life was about music, practicing, playing Mozart and Debussy, and also learning the songs of Rodgers and Hart and Rodgers and Hammerstein, which my father sang to make the living for us and put bread and cheese on our tables. And so I was always struggling to write. I wanted to write, and I wrote what I thought was a very good précis. I was asked to in a class. And I was listening at home. I was listening to T.S. Eliot's Cocktail Party. And we had a recording with Judith Anderson and Olivier and a bunch of English actors. Brilliant. And they read all of course, the Cocktail Party. And I wrote the précis, and I was so excited about it. I was so enormously excited about it. And I took it to my class, and she had asked for a big piece about something we cared about. And I thought, well, she's going to read this to the class. She didn't give it back to me. And I thought, well, she's holding it out for something good. And she actually called me to come back to see her. And I thought, oh, she's going to get me a publisher, perhaps. And she told me that she thought that this was plagiarized, that I had not written this. And I do think, I thought maybe when I decide to talk to somebody that's not on the planet anymore, which I don't think she is, I might want to find out what she has to say nowadays. Not a bad thing to do, but it horrified me. I think it kept me from writing songs. I wrote my dreams, I wrote my daily writings, but I did not write anymore after that for a long time. I was probably 18 when that happened, 17 maybe. And when I was 27 is when I started writing again. And it was because Leonard Cohen said to me, why aren't you writing your own songs? So it took somebody from an authority of his own experience to ask me that question in such a way. It was as though he was a monk after all, or at least he spent a lot of time at the monastery. And it was a question asked in such a way that I couldn't refute it and say, oh, how dare you, or what do you know, or what. It was just fell into the right place. And so that's when I wrote my first songs, and I'm still struggling to write. Speaking of nuns, I have just written something I've been working on for a while. It's a song about Thomas Merton. So we're sort of on the right path. The Seven-Story Mountain I have not written, but the song about Merton's life, which I hope will explore some of the mysteries about his life, I have written. So also I'm thinking about the way your life has evolved in terms of writing not only your secret poetry, which probably feeds your soul and feeds the rest of your work and your life. But also, I've run into these songs that you've written, that you've published in I think I find them only on your website. Wonderful little songs, short and beautiful. And also, I've seen your theater pieces with music. And so I know that you're multiply talented in terms of writing songs and prose and books. And I wonder how do you balance that all? Do you have a certain time that you need to spend on each one, or do you let it fall where it may?
Well, I let it fall where it may. I think my consistent practice of morning pages points me toward the next thing to do. Mm-hmm. I will be writing morning pages, and I'll say, wouldn't it be fun to write a musical about Merlin?
Oh, yes.
And so I wrote a musical about Merlin.
Yes.
Or wouldn't it be fun to write radiant songs? Mm. So I thought, radiant songs, I'm not gifted enough to write radiant songs. And then I wrote radiant songs. So the morning pages are a compass that guides us in the direction of our dreams. And often they are dreams we don't know we had. My music was buried like your writer was buried. Mm. I owe it to my friend Emma Lively, a composer, to have unblocked me as a musician. And like Leonard Cohen, she just thought, of course I could.
Mm.
And there's no fighting with, of course I can.
And there's no fighting with Emma Lively. What a spirit. What a wonderful combination that is. I also think that the one of the things you write about a lot and think about a lot and do is the artist date. And I wanted to talk to you about the artist date in terms of the listening pass. How does the artist date feed into this new book of yours? Talk to me about the artist date for a bit.
Okay, so when I wrote The Artist's Way, I thought there are two basic tools that are very important. Morning pages, daily writing, and then once a week, go out by yourself and do something festive. Have fun. And what I found when I started teaching the book was that people understood the work of morning pages. They were like, if I said I have a tool, it's a nightmare. You have to get up 45 minutes early. They would all say, oh, work on our creativity? I get it. People would willingly start doing morning pages. But then if I said, now once a week, I want you to play, they balked. And they were like arms folded across their chest, obstinate heads cocked, saying, I don't see what play has to do with creativity. And I said, well, we have an expression, the play of ideas. Don't realize that it's a prescription. If you play, you will have ideas. So it's a twofold. You're building a radio kit. With morning pages, you're sending, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. You're telling the universe your position on things. With artist dates, the universe tells you your position on things. You have intuitions, hunches, inspirations. And a lot of times people will say to me, Julia, I think I felt God. I'll say it like it's a forbidden word. I'll say, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, when I did my artist date, I felt like there was a benevolent something looking out after me. And I connected to that something. And so when I do artist dates, the world goes from being hostile and threatening to being inviting and benevolent. So how it works in the listening path, the beginning of that book is 3 tools: morning pages, artist dates, and walking. All 3 of these tools heighten your hearing.
Yes.
When you write morning pages, you're writing down what you hear. When you do an artist date, you're listening to the universe. When you walk, you're put in touch with your environment. And all 3 of those tools are the bedrock on which you build your listening path.
Thank you. Perfect. Oh, it's always amazing to hear what's your favorite artist date, by the way? Let's say what's the favorite one that you've had, let's say in the last week in this COVID? What have you done that's made into an artist date that pleased you?
Well, I'd rather talk about my favorite artist date of all times.
Oh, good.
Because I feel like it sets an example. That's going to a pet store where they have a giant bunny named George. And when you go to the pet store, they say, "Would you like to pet George?" Bend over. And I have a small dog that I live with, a Westie. And my Westie is about the same size as George the bunny. And when I pet George, I have a sense of wonder. I have a sense of play. I feel my heart open. And so that's my very favorite artist state.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful thing. I was thinking about the list of some of the artist dates that are mentioned in the book: going to a jewelry store, going to a pet store, going to a bookstore, going to a children's bookstore. I love that one. As soon as some of these children's bookstores open up again, I'm going to be there in a few minutes. I have this moment. I seem to have a question for our overseer here about the questions that are coming in from the audience.
Yes.
Do we have some questions now, Charlene?
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you're there.
All right, great. Thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of questions. The first one that actually goes to both of you, which is simply, how did the two of you connect and become friends?
Aha.
Do you want to tell, or I'll tell?
Well,
you both tell.
Both knew Jane Cecil.
Yes, we did.
She connected us as friends. And we also knew a woman named Virginia Dwan, a wonderful art collector and a great party giver.
Oh, yes. What a party giver she is.
So we met at Virginia's parties.
Yeah.
And then what happened was I was suspicious that Judy was a writer. I sometimes feel like I'm a little Geiger counter. And when I'm around an artist, something internal starts ticking. And Judy has written Cravings, Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, My Life in Music, The 7 T's, Finding Hope and Healing in the Wake of Tragedy, Sanity and Grace, A Journey of Suicide, Survival, and Strength, Singing Lessons, a memoir of love, loss, hope, and healing, Shameless, a novel, which was indeed shameless, and Trust Your Heart, an autobiography. So when I met Judy and we began to realize that we were traveling in the same circles, I asked her if she had any manuscripts. And she looked stricken and didn't want to give it to me. And I said, "Oh, please." Mm-hmm. And she gave it to me finally. And I read it and thought, this needs to go to Joel Fotinos, my editor. He will love this. Mm-hmm. So I took the book to Joel, and Joel called me up and said, "Is this the Judy Collins?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, she's a wonderful writer." And I know that. I think I'm going to publish her. And he did.
And he did 3 times. And I am so grateful to you. You were right. I was stunned that you wanted to read it. And then I was stunned that I sent it to you. Yes. Because I wasn't sure. When my son died, I started writing because of the morning pages. Out of the morning pages came a series of meditations on how to live through a suicide. I think people need that book, and they needed it. And that's where Sanity and Grace came from. And actually, Joel published 3 of my books. And so Julia and I would trust her with my life and certainly with my writing. And as a friendship, there's nothing like a great friend. And she is a great friend, and I'm so grateful for her. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, darling.
You're very welcome.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. There's a few questions about integrating these practices into the real circumstances of a woman's life. Shasha wrote in a question. She said, any tips or suggestions for doing this at a time of life when you have little time to yourself? My son is currently 2.5 years old. She's, of course, during a pandemic, and I want to reignite my creative and listening life, but I'm finding it hard to do so.
Mm. Well, first of all, I know that Julia has answers for that, but I would just start by getting the book, because it will give you a start. It'll start your engine going, I'm sure. Isn't that true, Julia?
Well, that's my hope. But I wanted to say, I began writing morning pages when my daughter was 2.5.
Oh.
What I found was that I had to get up early and race to the page before my daughter woke up and wanted my attention. Mm. Then when she was a little bit older, I said to her, Mommy's writing. And I would keep on writing. And what I found, my daughter is now 46 years old and has been writing morning pages since she was 17. Now she teaches her own daughter, Mommy's writing. So I think you need to be careful not to be too strict with yourself. You know, if it's a morning where you miss writing, you can do it later in the day. Better late than never.
Better late than never.
Be tender with yourself. It sounds like you have your whip out saying, I must do this perfectly just the way she's outlined it. And I'd encourage you to experiment instead.
Progress, not perfection.
It's fantastic. Julia, how did you come across the practice of morning pages? And how long have you been practicing it?
I've been practicing it for over 30 years. And how I came across the practice was I had a career as a Hollywood screenwriter, and I had a movie get scuttled, and it broke my heart. And I moved to Taos, New Mexico, to a little mountain town, and I moved into an adobe house at the end of a dirt road. And my daughter hated it because it wasn't lively like New York. And we would have cows come to the windows. And I started getting up and writing morning pages so that I would have something to salve, S-A-L-V-E, a broken heart. So they were undertaken out of necessity. And what happened was I wrote them for about 90 days. And then all of a sudden one day, a character came strolling into the pages, a woman painter named Johnny. And I suddenly realized, oh, I don't have to be a Hollywood screenwriter.
Oh.
I could be a novelist.
Oh.
So that was the start of Morning Pages.
How wonderful.
There have been a few questions about what it actually looks like for you to do the morning pages. And people who have read this and practiced it and sort of are asking, could Julia give a demonstration? And I don't quite know what that question means. Like, I roll out of bed and I write my pages, or I do it over coffee, or what has been your experience in actually carrying out this practice? Or Judy, Julie or Julia answering.
Judy, do you want to go?
I'll tell you that Julia has said, don't kill yourself over perfection. Get it done somehow. I have written my journals for years and years and years. I have found out in the past 5 or 6 years that I can't read my handwriting. And I am now dictating, because I have that function both on this computer and on my telephone, that I can go to my phone and I can read my morning pages into my phone, and then I can print it out on my computer or put it into my journals. I must say that it works just the same, and it's either before coffee or during coffee or after coffee. That's it.
I want to second Judy's enthusiasm for coffee. I make my coffee at night, and I put it in the refrigerator. And when I get up in the morning, I wake up and I pad to the kitchen and I pour myself an iced coffee, street to the living room to a love seat that looks out over at the mountains. And I say, I'm awake and I'm grumpy.
We tell it like it is.
I'm awake and I'm grumpy. I don't have a good plan for the day. I need to remember to call Emma. I need to talk to Judy. I haven't talked to Judy in a little bit. And so I write notes to myself. And I think it's important to say that morning pages are scattered. When you write a journal, you set a topic. Everything I think about my mother, everything I think about Fred. Write morning pages, you go, I forgot to buy kitty litter.
Yes.
Call my sister back. Or has a funny knock in it.
Yeah.
You write the petty to the profound.
It's terrific. Thank you. There are sort of a pair of questions. One person, and I'm looking at who this was, Emily, wrote in that she and her best friend Quinn are both watching you, one in California, the other in New York. They're both 25 and writers, and they did The Artist's Way when COVID began. Might you offer some wisdom for young women writers starting out on their journeys?
Well, the wisdom that I have to offer makes me sound like a fanatic. What I would say to anyone starting on their journey is, for God's sake, do morning pages, and they will lead you. I think that pages train you to expand. The first time they bring up a risk, you think, I can't do that. The second time they bring up a risk, you think, I don't think I can do that. The third time they bring up a risk, you think, oh, all right, for God's sake.
Shut up and I'll go on with it.
That, oh, for God's sake, I'll try it, is the risk that moves you out of the forest.
Yeah.
Judy, how about you? Any advice to young writers?
Everything is scary about life in most cases. So don't expect things to be easy or fear less. Fear is a good motivator, and getting prompted by what is suggested in morning pages is better than having your sister tell you to do it or your mother tell you to do it. Mostly it has to come from inside. So whatever that direction is that you want to go, I think Julia's right. You'll hear this coming from somewhere in yourself. It's nice to have feedback from people, but the ultimate judge of where you should go and where you have gone and whether you're getting it right is you. And that's the courageous act. The writing is the courageous act, and the following through with it, because it's going into the unknown. What is it about life on the planet that we don't get it, that's what we're supposed to be doing? We're going into the unknown at all times, because nothing is assured. Today is not, tomorrow is not guaranteed. But what is guaranteed is that you can take hold of the reins at any time in your life, at any hour of the day or night, and move forward. And yes, you may be terrified. I've been terrified much of my life about things I was going to do. Not about standing on the stage and singing, because I know how to do that. But it's the other things that are the scary ones that take the courage and that actually give you the prizes, I must say.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you. There's like so many other questions. I know we've got maybe 10 minutes or so. Can I just ask maybe a couple more? And then I know, Judy, you probably want to ask some sort of final questions, or both of you making some kind of closing statements, sharing this wisdom and inspiration is just fantastic. One question, sort of another life stage type question. Anonymous person wrote in, both of you are vibrant, creative women. What's your relationship with aging? What advice would you give to your about to turn 40 selves? And I would add yourselves quite a few years down the road from 40.
You want to go first?
I'm 72. And I look in the mirror and I think, oh, you could pass for 60. And I have wrinkles, and I have a different figure than I had. And what I find is that when I am creating, I'm timeless. When I'm making something, when I'm writing something, when I'm taking a risk, like Judy was talking about taking a risk with writing, when I'm doing that, I'm ageless. And I don't have a sense that time is passing me by. So I think the answer to what can we do about aging is creativity.
Yeah, I totally agree. Lucky people, artists, because there's no question of stopping, and there's no question of retirement, and there's no question of turning back. From the age of infancy, I had to work hard because I had to make music and I had to practice. Therefore, I learned about discipline. I had to. And I'm sure that all those years of practicing the piano, playing those scales and exercises, and learning Mozart and Rachmaninoff have held me in very good stead. But the truth is, I grew up with the musicians all around me. I understood that the reason that Horowitz played better at, well, I think he died at 86. He played better as well at 86 as he did at 18. Much, much better, in fact, because of his life experience. And I also know that when you are working creatively, there is no time, there are no decades, there is no stop point, no start point. There is progressing and moving through this thing that you're given and that you give yourself. You know, the gift was given you at birth. You had something in your DNA, but you have to give yourself that gift back every time you pick up a pen or a pencil or a typewriter or a telephone that has dictation in it. You're doing that, and it moves you through the stages of life. I don't ever see retirement. What is retirement? First of all, it's death. And for those of us who have the creative gene somewhere in us, we recognize it. And we don't want to go anywhere near it. Because, and you know, even people who don't live a creative life will say to me, if he stops working, he's going to die. That's what happens. And so we associate age with what we look like. I tell you something, it's very important to live a healthy life, to eat well, to meditate, to exercise, to indulge in the great gifts that we're all given by just being born on this planet. What a fortunate thing to be able to spend a little time here. I mean, who knows where we're going next? I don't know. But to be here and to be able to be creative, what an incredible gift. But if you don't have good health and you don't recognize and honor this unbelievable gift that's given to you by being of an organic system that takes taking care of it. You have to take care. That's your work. That's your work. I was listening to somebody talk on almost the equivalent of a TED talk the other day about spirituality. He said, I'm making a deal with God. I'm giving half of my life to God, and I'll do the rest. And the half that God gets to worry, and I get to work. That's it.
Mm. Terrific. So one last question then from the audience, which gets us back to listening and the art of listening and the listening path. So you're writing, you're doing your artist date, doing your pages, and you're hearing from within yourself voices. Kirsten asked, how do you decipher these different voices? She wrote, sometimes I don't know if I'm acting out of fear or intuition.
Well, whichever comes up first, I guess. Because don't judge it. I guess that's it. When I know Julia has things to say about this too, but when we're told not to judge the material, you get it down, you get it written, and you don't judge it along the way. It will reveal its true nature as time goes along, but the day you put it on the page is not the day to make that decision. And who cares where it's coming from? It's either God or the trees outdoors or your very DNA, but wherever it comes from, you're grateful. One of the things you can do is be grateful.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sherilyn.
I was going to say, someone clarified that question. What is the best way to listen to your intuition?
Okay, so we're back to morning pages. Morning pages, artist dates, walks. Those are the three best ways to listen to your intuition, and that's why they open the book. And then we go further and we say, listen to other people more carefully. Don't interrupt. Then we say, listen to those beyond the veil. Listen with an open mind. Be willing and vulnerable and childlike and trusting. And if it's just your imagination, think, my God, what a great imagination I've got. And then we say, reach out to your heroes, to people that you didn't know, but you admired. When you reach to your heroes, you're reaching for attributes of yourself that you may not have recognized. I had somebody say to me, Julia, I reached out to my hero. It was Einstein. And the next day I was smarter. So after listening to your heroes, we take ourselves into listening to silence. And that's the final layer of the listening path, where you listen for the still small voice, which isn't always so still and so small.
Yeah.
And when we listen to silence, we hear sort of the sound of the universe. And it's actually full.
I'm reading something from Rumi that is in your closing pages of your wonderful book. And it says, in silence, there is eloquence. Stop weaving and see how the pattern improves. And it's Rumi. And there's another thing that I think about, which is do it and then let it go. And then hear the reverberation of the words, of the text, of the music. You know how a note will sound and then the echo will go on for a long, long time. And it's very soothing. I like a lot to listen to Gregorian chant. I'm enchanted with Gregorian chant. It's a mysterious and meditative and powerful thing to listen to. It helps me. It's like reading Rumi, as you were saying. It's like hearing something that is it's ancient, and it tells me things that I need to know without even knowing what they are. Anyway, that's a half answer to the question, I guess.
Do you want to sort of begin to close things up, or would you like a couple more questions? How do you both feel?
Well, I'm thrilled to hear the questions as well.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Well, they're pouring in. So, yeah.
We can take a couple more. What do you think?
Great. So Christina wrote, can you talk about making the leap from the morning pages to doing the actual writing? She says she teaches the artist's way, and the number one thing my students are constantly asking is, when does that leap take place, and what does that look like for you?
Well, it starts as an inner impulse to write something. You'll have a notion of something that you want to write. You keep your morning pages intact. You keep writing 3 pages daily of morning pages, but you'll find yourself itching to write later in the day. And when you scratch that itch, that's the beginning of a new project.
Yeah.
So, it comes to you through morning pages, and it's an inner impulse, and you will feel it. And I can't give you a timeline on it, but I can tell you that for me, I had been writing morning pages about 90 days when Johnny showed up.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be too hurried.
Great. Another question is, how does doing the artist's way during a pandemic change the process?
Well, I would say that it is the process, and actually the pandemic may give you some peace and some time and some tranquility that you didn't have before. You know, there's a gift in everything. Nothing happens by accident in the universe. I'm convinced of it. And I know that the planet is getting a rest, and a lot of us are getting a rest. And yes, it's not the most fun, jolly time that we'll ever have. But in a lot of instances, it gives some space and time to things that need hatching out and to need thinking about and tranquility in order to come to fruition. And I have found it for myself. It's very, it's provocative, it's interesting, and it's a combination of the silence and the absence of certain kinds of noise, speaking of noise, in my life. And I'm finding it a place where creativity is welcome and comes.
Okay, great. Another question refers to the evening pages and makes a connection between that and the, is it the 10th or the 11th step? The 10th step in the program, as this person, Deborah, wrote. Do you feel a connection between that? What's been your experience?
I want to say that evening writing is by nature reflective, and you're going over a day that you've had, and you may be powerless to change, or you may see places where you would like to change. And I think that the habit of evening introspection is a good habit, And I will sit in the living room on my couch and I will write, what do I need guidance about? And then I will listen. And I ask for direct guidance in the evening. I sometimes ask it in the morning, right after my morning pages, but I definitely ask it in the evening. And I think that the habit of putting pen to page is a wonderful introspection.
Yes, I fully agree. And it does create this marvelous circle of connectiveness between the looking back and the looking forward, and the freedom of the mind in the morning and the assessing of what's going on in life in the evening. It's a perfect circle, isn't it? And well, I want to say this is an amazing experience to be here, and I thought I'd say to Sherilyn, probably will say a few things about this experience, and never enough to say how wonderful it is, because it is very rare to be able to talk to an artist and a creative powerhouse in a way that's sort of like a master class, really, with Julia. And I'm honored and privileged to be able to do that with you, Julia. And I thank you for your humor and your insight and your talent, and the fact that you have helped so many millions of people to get through the days and into something creative and sparkling and wondrous and Jerusalem and hallelujah all at once. So thank you for allowing me to be here. I so much appreciate it.
I thank you very much for coming. And I felt like our friendship has been forged artist to artist.
Yeah.
And I am looking forward to future books, Judy.
Thank you, darling. I'm going to get at it and get it together and do my morning pages and get motivated on the ones that have come to me and are waiting for my attention. Thanks again, Julia. And of course, to Green Apple Books and the Bay Area Book Festival Woman's Lit series. This is a marvelous series that's brought us together. And again, I'm Judy Collins, and thank you for watching Julia Cameron, her new book, The Listening Path, and you'll find it and get a hold of lots of copies for your friends as well as yourself. And thank you for watching Women's Lit Unbound. Thanks so much.